When I walked into that reunion, every conversation in the room just stopped. 10 years ago, those same faces had laughed while I counted change at a gas station, grease on my hands, a baby waiting at home. But that night, I stepped out of a Rolls Royce with the woman they'd only ever seen on magazine covers. And for the first time, it was their turn to go quiet. The bell over my shop door dinged right as I was elbow deep under a Civic. I slid out on the creeper, wiped my hands on the old rag I keep in my back pocket, and saw my 6-year-old, Lily, standing there with a cream envelope clutched like treasure. "Daddy, you got a fancy letter," she said, sounding out the curls of the handwriting. The return address made my jaw tighten. Derek Malone. 10 years since high school, and his name still landed like a thrown bottle. I cracked the seal and found a glossy invitation to our reunion, plus a little note in neat, confident pen strokes. "Really hope you can make it, Jack. Everyone would love to hear about your journey." I didn't need a translator for the tone. Back then, Derek got his laughs by pointing at the guy on the floor. I was usually the guy on the floor. He hadn't changed his handwriting, and it looked like he hadn't changed his hobby, either. "What's a reunion?" Lily asked, hopping onto the workbench and swinging her legs like she owned the place. "It's a party for people Daddy went to school with," I said, folding the invitation back into its envelope. "Are they your friends?" "Not really, kiddo." "Then why do they want you to come?" That one landed harder than Derek's name. I kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled like the strawberry shampoo she insists on, then set the envelope under a socket set. "Sometimes people invite you for the wrong reason. Like when Zoe only invites me, so I'll bring gummy bears." Exactly like that. The bell chimed again. Ava Whitaker stepped in like she always did, heels daring my stained concrete, tablet under one arm, coffee in the other. She'd been dropping by for months to talk through a few engineering problems for her company's automotive division, and somehow those talks turned into "How's Lily? And you sleeping at all? And here's a better way to brace that subframe." She set the coffee on the counter and pointed her chin at the envelope. "What's got your face doing that?" she asked. I handed it over. Ava's jaw tightened as she read. She didn't bother pretending to be polite. "This is from the guy who gave you hell," she said. "Used to," I answered, fiddling with a wrench I'd already cleaned. "Doesn't matter now." "When is it?" 3 weeks. "And I'm not going." Ava put the invitation down like it might bite and looked me dead in the eye. "You're going. I appreciate the pep talk, but I'm going with you," she said, calm as a judge. "You don't have to do that." "Lily, sweetheart," Ava added without looking away from me. "Didn't your dad get new markers for the office?" Lily lit up and ran off to the little desk we'd set up by the parts catalogs. When the office door clicked, Ava stepped closer. I could smell clean linen and motor oil, which is a better mix than it sounds. "How many times did that guy humiliate you when things were rough?" she asked. "I stopped counting," I said. "And he wants an encore. That's why you are going. Not to perform. To stand there as yourself and let the truth do its job. I don't need to prove anything to them." "Maybe not," she said, softer now. "But Lily's getting older. Sooner or later she'll sit across from kids whose parents were there. They'll tell their version if you don't show yours." I looked past Ava at the little office window. Lily was humming, sorting markers by color, serious as a surgeon. For years earlier, after Grace died, I'd learned how many people are brave from a distance. Derek wasn't brave from any distance. He was loud. Suddenly, the invite felt less like a trap and more like an opportunity to keep a promise I'd made to myself the night I brought Lily home from the hospital. She'll see her dad stand up straight. "I hate the idea of walking into a room built for someone else's joke," I said. "Then bring your own punchline," Ava said. "You. As you are now. Not the version they kept in their heads." I didn't answer right away. I listened to the shop, the slow tick of cooling metal, the hiss of the compressor settling, the small, happy sounds of my kid coloring in the office. I thought about what dignity looks like when you're out of money and out of breath and still have to be a father in the morning. It isn't loud. It just keeps showing up. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll go." Ava's mouth curved, half approval, half challenge. You said you're coming," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I could use someone at my side who doesn't scare easy." "Good," she said, "because I already texted my driver." I blinked. "You just got here." I read fast. I laughed despite myself, then glanced at the envelope one more time. "Everyone would love to hear about your journey." Fine. They could hear it. From me, not from Derek. I wiped my hands again, even though they were already clean, and called toward the office. Lily, you want pizza tonight? Her chair scraped. With mushrooms. Deal, I said, and looked back at Ava. If we're doing this, we do it our way. No gloating. No speeches. Just show up, shake hands, and go home. That's your way, she said. It's the right one. I slid the invitation into the drawer with the title paperwork for Carter and Daughter Otto. Funny how a thin piece of cardstock could press on a decade's worth of weight. I shut the drawer, felt something settle in my chest, and nodded once. 3 weeks, I said. Ava took her coffee, lifted it in a little toast, and smiled. 3 weeks. For winters before that invitation showed up, I was driving home from my second job at a gas station. It was close to midnight, wind slicing across the highway hard enough to make the steering wheel shudder in my hands. The snow was coming sideways, visibility down to maybe 10 feet, and my heater was coughing its last breath. I'd been awake for 19 hours, my hands cracked and raw from oil and salt. Lily was safe next door with Mrs. Harris, the neighbor who'd practically adopted us after Grace died. I just wanted to make it home, get 4 hours of sleep, and start again at the shop. But then I saw them, hazard lights, barely blinking through the storm. I almost kept driving. Honest truth. My fingers were stiff, and the thought of crawling under another car made my stomach turn. But something in me couldn't ignore it. So I pulled over. Inside the stranded SUV was a woman, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Designer coat, diamond studs, and eyes wide with the kind of fear that strips away pride. When she rolled down the window, cold air punched through the gap. Please, my car just died. I've been here 2 hours. My phone's dead. Pop the hood, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even as my own body trembled. The engine bay looked like it had been frozen solid. Battery dead, wiring corroded. My gloves soaked through in minutes. I lay under that car while the wind tried to bury me, working until I couldn't feel my hands anymore. She kept begging me to come inside to warm up, but I just kept saying, almost got it. 45 minutes later, when the engine finally coughed back to life, she started crying. Not dramatic tears, just quiet, exhausted ones. How much do I owe you? She asked, her breath fogging the air. Nothing, I said, wiping slush off my face. Just get somewhere warm. Please, let me pay you. You might have saved my life. I shook my head. I've got a daughter at home. If she ever gets stuck like this, I hope someone helps her, too. That's enough. She hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled out a business card. My name's Ava Whitaker. If you ever need anything, call me. I mean it. I took it just to be polite. When you're broke, people always say things like that. If you ever need anything, but they don't mean it. I shoved the card into my pocket and drove home, heater still dead, thinking only about the formula I needed to buy in the morning. What I didn't know then was that she sat in her car for 20 minutes after I left, crying for a different reason. Something about that night. A broke mechanic freezing in the snow but still refusing to take money shifted something in her. Ava was the CEO of a company her father had left drowning in debt. That night, she decided she wouldn't sell it like the board wanted. She'd rebuild it instead. My small act of decency had apparently reminded her what strength looked like. I didn't find any of that out until years later, after she showed up in my shop wearing those same heels that didn't belong anywhere near oil stains. She'd tell me, that night saved me. I'd tell her she was being dramatic. But she wasn't wrong. That blizzard was where both our stories started to thaw. 3 weeks flew by faster than I expected. 1 minute, I was under a Subaru changing a timing belt. The next, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, wearing a suit I hadn't touched since Grace's funeral. It still fit, which said more about my diet than my discipline. Lily stood in the doorway, holding her pink hairbrush like a microphone. Daddy, you look like a movie star, she said. More like an extra, I told her. One they cut from the final version. Ava laughed from the living room. You look fine, Jack. Better than fine. When I stepped outside, I realized fine was an understatement. A silver Rolls-Royce waited at the curb, its paint catching the streetlights like liquid metal. Her driver stood by the door in a black suit, holding an umbrella even though the sky was clear. I froze halfway down the steps. You serious? I asked. Ava smiled, that effortless, confident smile she had. If I'm going to a reunion in Minnesota, I'm not doing it in a rental sedan. I was thinking my truck. She glanced at it. Rusted tailgate, mismatched door, muffler hanging by a wire. and just said, no. By the time we reached the Grandview Hotel, my stomach felt like it had swallowed a toolbox. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the ballroom already full, 60 or so faces from a life I'd worked hard to forget. Derek's face stood out immediately. Same confident grin, same too-perfect haircut. He was holding a drink, mid-laugh, probably telling a story about me. The rolls eased to a stop. The driver opened Ava's door first. She stepped out in a red dress that looked like it was made of sunlight and confidence. Then she turned and held out her hand to me. When I stepped out, the whole room inside seemed to pause. You could feel the silence through the glass, like someone hit mute on the world. People turned. Conversations froze. I saw Derek's hand stop halfway to his bourbon glass. He blinked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. We walked in together. Ava's hand rested in the crook of my arm, calm and sure. The air smelled like perfume, champagne, and surprise. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Derek was the first to recover. He stepped forward with that old salesman's grin and offered his hand. Jack Carter. Man, it's been forever. You clean up nice. I shook it. Derek, I was just telling everyone how you used to fix up those beaters behind your uncle's place, he said, voice too loud, too rehearsed. You still working at that little garage? Still own it, I said. Carter and Daughter Auto. And I do some consulting for Whitaker Motors. He blinked. Consulting. Before he could laugh, Ava spoke. Jack runs my entire engineering division. Without him, my company wouldn't exist. Her tone was flat, not boastful, the kind that freezes people faster than a blizzard. You could have heard a pin drop. Someone whispered, "Is that Ava Whitaker?" Another voice said, "The CEO?" Phones came out. Derek's smirk collapsed. Ava smiled slightly, the kind that doesn't reach her eyes. Good to finally meet you, Derek. I've heard stories. For once, he didn't know what to say. I looked around that room. All the faces that used to snicker when my car broke down, all the people who thought struggle was contagious and felt nothing but calm. No heat, no vengeance, just a quiet satisfaction that the past couldn't touch me anymore. When I caught Derek's eyes again, I gave him a small nod. Good to see you, man. It's been a while. His throat worked like he was swallowing glass. Yeah, he said. A long while. I smiled. Let's catch up later. I think your bartender's looking for you. As we walked toward the center of the room, Ava leaned closer and whispered, "You're enjoying this." Maybe a little, I said, but only because it's peaceful when people finally stop talking. And just like that, for the first time in 10 years, the noise of my past finally went quiet. Derek tried to recover his charm, like a man drowning who still thought he could swim. "So, Jack," he said with that brittle grin, "how exactly does a mechanic end up consulting for a billion-dollar company?" I could have answered, but Ava beat me to it. "He doesn't consult," she said evenly. "He runs my automotive engineering division. The man who designed the system that saved my company $8 million in production losses last year." Murmurs spread across the room like ripples in glass. Someone's drink hit the floor. Phones came out, people whispering her name. Ava Whitaker, the Ava Whitaker. Derek blinked fast, forcing a laugh. Right. Sure. I mean, hey, good for you, Jack. Ava turned toward him, polite but merciless. Do you know how we met? The air tightened. Nobody dared move. She stepped forward a little, her voice calm and cutting. For years ago, I was stranded in a blizzard outside of Duluth. My car had died. My phone was dead. I was hypothermic. I'd been there for 2 hours, thinking that was how my story would end. Then headlights appeared through the snow. I stood still, every muscle locked. I hadn't expected her to tell this story. This man, she said, pointing gently toward me, crawled under my car in sub-zero temperatures. His gloves had holes. His jacket was duct-taped. He was exhausted, freezing, and still refused to take a single dollar. He just said, "If my daughter were ever stuck out here, I'd want someone to help her too." The room went silent, not polite quiet, but reverent quiet, the kind that makes you feel the weight of your own breathing. Ava's gaze swept across the crowd. I later learned he was working 3 jobs. His wife had died 15 months earlier in a construction accident. He was raising a baby alone, barely keeping the lights on. And yet, in that moment, he gave a stranger everything he had left to give. Jennifer Riley, the same woman who once started rumors that I left Lily in the shop because I couldn't afford daycare, was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Ava's tone softened but didn't lose strength. That act of kindness changed my life. I didn't sell my father's company. I rebuilt it, brick by brick, because if a man like Jack Carter could keep fighting, then so could I. He's not just my engineer. He's the reason Whitaker Motors exists today. Every story Derek had ever told about me, the jokes, the cheap laughs, died right there on the carpet. Ava turned to him. I steady. You invited him here to make fun of him, didn't you? To see if he was still struggling, still small enough to make you feel big. Derek opened his mouth, but nothing came out. You never understood, she said quietly. Jack was never the failure. He was just growing roots deeper than you could see. Some people bloom late, Derek, but when they do, they make the rest of the garden look dull. I could feel every pair of eyes in that room on me, waiting for a reaction, a smirk, a jab, some victory pose. But I just nodded once and said, she's right about one thing. I did bloom late. Took me a long time to figure out that real success isn't loud. Nobody spoke. Derek's face had drained of color. His bourbon sat untouched. I put my hand gently on Ava's arm. That's enough, I said. No need to burn the place down. She gave a small, proud smile. Too late. Fire's already out there. I just made sure everyone saw the smoke. Laughter flickered through the crowd, nervous, uncertain, but I didn't mind. The truth was standing tall enough for both of us. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was defending who I was. I just was. When the silence finally cracked, all those faces turned toward me, waiting for some kind of victory speech or maybe a breakdown. I wasn't sure which one they expected more. I cleared my throat and said quietly, "You don't have to look so shocked. I'm still the same guy who worked under a leaky roof and counted quarters at gas stations. I just finally got enough light to grow." I saw Derek flinch. His hand tightened around his glass. I took a step closer, not aggressive, just steady. "You know, I remember all the jokes. The pictures you posted when my car broke down. The stories about how I couldn't afford diapers. You thought you were being funny. But I was 25, a widower with a baby and bills stacked taller than I could see. I wasn't a punchline. I was trying to survive." Nobody moved. A few people shifted their eyes to the floor. "My wife, Grace, died when Lily was 18 months old," I said. "A crane accident at the site she worked on. One minute I was waiting for her to text that she was on her way home. The next minute I was getting a call from the hospital chaplain. After that, every day felt like a fight just to stand up." A low murmur rippled through the room. Most of them hadn't known. They just saw a tired single dad, not the wreckage underneath. "I didn't come here tonight to rub anyone's face in success," I continued. "I came because my daughter asked me to. She said, 'Daddy, you should go. You always tell me not to be afraid of people who laughed at you.' She's 6. She's smarter than I am." That got a faint chuckle from somewhere in the back. I looked straight at Derek then. "You kicked me when I was down, man. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. But anger's heavy, and I carried enough weight back then. I had to learn to let it go." His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. "Jack, I stopped him with a small shake of my head. "You don't owe me anything. Just don't be that guy again. Not to anyone. Life's got a way of knocking people around without our help." He nodded slowly, his eyes wet, voice cracking. "I'm sorry, man. For all of it." I gave him a tired smile. "Apology accepted." Just like that. "Yeah, because forgiveness doesn't make me weak. It just means I'm done carrying you on my back." For a moment the room was still again, but it wasn't awkward this time. It was full of something lighter, like air after a storm. Ava slipped her hand into mine. "Ready to go?" "Yeah," I said, glancing once more around that ballroom. "I think this chapter's closed." As we headed toward the exit, I heard Derek call out softly, "How do you forgive people who made you miserable?" I turned back. "You start by realizing they didn't make you miserable. You just let them take too much space in your head. Once you take it back, they stop mattering." He nodded, and I could tell he finally understood what all his years of control hadn't bought him: peace. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. The stars hung over the parking lot like quiet witnesses. Ava squeezed my hand and said, "You could have destroyed him in there." "What would be the point?" I said. "Revenge doesn't build anything. But maybe mercy plants a seed." She smiled. "That's why I like you, Jack Carter." I laughed softly. "Yeah, well, it took me a decade to like myself." The driver opened the door to the rolls. I held it for her instead. For the first time in a long time, I felt lighter than the coat on my shoulders. The past was still behind me, but it wasn't chasing anymore. The rolls eased out of the hotel parking lot, headlights cutting through the mist as the city rolled by in silence. I loosened my tie, leaned my head back, and finally exhaled. My heart had been steady the whole night, but now that it was over, I could feel how hard it had worked just to stay calm. Ava sat beside me, quiet, watching the lights flicker against the glass. After a minute, she said, "You know, part of me wanted to tear into him, to list every cruel thing that man did to you and let him drown in it." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I saw that look in your eyes." She turned her head toward me. "But you didn't. You just forgave him. I don't know if I could have done that." "It's not forgiveness," I said after a moment. "It's exhaustion. Anger's like carrying sandbags uphill. You keep thinking it makes you strong, but it just keeps you from moving." She studied me, her eyes softer now. "You really believe that?" "I do. I used to spend every night replaying things I wished I'd said. The insults, the jokes, the pity. But the truth is, nobody hears your best comebacks when you whisper them at the ceiling." Eventually, I just stopped trying to win arguments in my head. Ava looked down at her hands. "You could have destroyed him tonight. Your story, your success, your dignity. That was enough to bury his ego. What would that change?" I asked. "He'd go home angry, not wiser. I'd go home proud, but still poisoned. That's not winning. It's just spreading the same infection." She smiled a little. "You sound like someone who's made peace with the universe." "I've made peace with what's left of it," I said. "Grace used to tell me anger's like drinking poison and hoping someone else gets sick." She wasn't wrong. Ava was quiet for a while. Then she said softly, "Grace sounds like she was incredible." "She was," I said, my voice catching for the first time that night. "She kept me grounded. And she'd be the first to tell me I'm still a stubborn fool." "She'd be proud of you," Ava said. "Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. That's rare." I looked at her then, really looked. The same woman who once stood shivering in the snow, now sitting beside me in a gown worth more than my old truck, but still looking at me like I was the reason she'd made it home. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "These past 6 months working together, seeing how you treat people, watching you with Lily, I've been trying not to admit it, but I've fallen for you." I didn't answer right away. I just stared out at the city blurring past, neon and rain mixing into streaks of color. "You know," I said finally, "the night I found you in that storm, I sat in my truck after you drove off. Couldn't feel my fingers. Heater was broken. I had $8 in my wallet. And I remember thinking about how you looked at me. Not like a loser fixing your car. Like a man worth something. I've thought about that look every day since." She smiled. "You have. When you walked into my shop 6 months ago, I thought I was hallucinating. I didn't know whether to fix your car or ask if you were real." "I was real," she said softly, her hand finding mine. "Still am." I squeezed her hand. "So what happens now?" "Now." She smiled. "Now we go home. We tell Lily about the reunion, about how her dad faced his ghosts and walked away taller. And tomorrow," she paused, "tomorrow we see where this goes." The rolls glided through the last green light before the suburbs. I looked out at the quiet streets and thought how strange it was. Sometimes you think life's punishing you, when really, it's just preparing you to meet the person who'll see your worth before you do. Ava leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know, you could have been cruel back there," she said softly. "Yeah," I murmured. "But kindness travels farther." For the first time in a decade, I wasn't driving away from my past. I was driving toward my future. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the house lights were glowing warm against the cold night. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Harris reading to Lily on the couch, her voice calm, Lily's legs tucked under a blanket patterned with cartoon cars. When I opened the door, Lily jumped up and ran toward me. "Daddy, you're back," she said, wrapping her arms around my legs. "Did the mean people say sorry?" Ava laughed softly behind me. I crouched to meet my daughter's eyes. "Some of them did," I said. "And that's good enough." Lily squinted like a detective. "You didn't punch anyone, right?" I grinned. "No punches. Just words." "Words can be better," she said seriously. "Mrs. Harris says words can fix people if you use them right." "She's a smart woman," I said, looking up at our elderly neighbor, who was smiling at us from the couch. After she left for the night, I hung up my jacket and joined Ava in the kitchen. She'd already found the cocoa powder and 2 mugs. I hope you don't mind, she said. Your daughter invited me for hot chocolate. Lily was already climbing onto a stool, pointing like a tiny foreman. Extra marshmallows for Miss Ava. I started warming milk on the stove while Lily chattered about school, about how she wanted to be a scientist so she could invent cars that run on hugs. Ava listened like it was the most important idea she'd ever heard. Then, out of nowhere, Lily said, "Daddy, am I poor?" The question hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. "What makes you ask that?" I said carefully. "Sarah at school said I'm poor because we don't have a big house or a pool. She said that's why Mom doesn't live with us anymore." The room went quiet. Ava's hand froze halfway to the sugar jar. I turned off the stove, knelt beside Lily, and took her little hands in mine. "Baby, your mom died in an accident. That's why she's not here. And we're not poor, okay? We have everything we need. A roof, food, people who love us. That's what matters." Lily's brow furrowed like she was trying to measure that against what Sarah had said. Ava came closer, crouching beside me. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. Lily nodded solemnly. "I have more money than I could ever spend," Ava said. "A big house, lots of cars, fancy things. But you know when I'm happiest?" "When?" Lily whispered. "Right now? Here with you and your dad, making hot chocolate in a kitchen that smells like cinnamon." Lily thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "So we're rich." Ava laughed. "The richest, sweetheart." I pulled Lily into a hug, feeling her tiny heartbeat against mine. "That's right," I said. "Richest people on the planet." Later, when she was tucked in, I stood in the doorway watching her breathe softly against her pillow. Ava stepped beside me and whispered, "She's something special." "She's everything," I said quietly. When Grace died, I promised our daughter would grow up surrounded by love, not pity. Tonight felt like keeping that promise. Ava looked up at me. I soughed. "You kept it, Jack. More than you realize." We walked back to the kitchen, the mugs still warm, the house finally still. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Ava brushed a speck of cocoa from her sleeve and smiled. "You know," she said, "I think your daughter likes me." I chuckled. "Careful. She doesn't hand out approvals easily." "Guess I'll have to earn it," she said. "You already have," I told her. And as we turned off the lights, I realized something simple but true. After years of fighting storms, we'd finally made it home. 6 months later, I stood at the end of a long white aisle, hands clasped behind my back, feeling both overdressed and undeserving. The Whitaker estate was nothing short of cinematic. Lanterns hanging from oak trees, soft jazz spilling out over the gardens, and 200 guests who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. But none of it mattered, not really. What mattered was the small girl in a flower crown marching proudly down the aisle, tossing rose petals like she was leading a parade. Lily's grin was wide enough to split the clouds. She caught my eye and whispered, "Don't cry, Daddy." Too late, I mouthed back. Then Ava appeared, red hair pinned back, eyes steady, moving with that quiet confidence that had undone every wall I'd built. For a moment, the noise, the guests, the string quartet, all of it blurred into a single sound, like wind through leaves. She reached me, her hand sliding into mine, warm and sure. When the officiant began speaking, my thoughts drifted, not out of distraction, but gratitude. I remembered the blizzard, the garage, the mockery. Every insult that once felt like a nail now looked like scaffolding for the man standing here. When we exchanged vows, Ava's voice trembled just enough to remind me she was human. "You fixed my car," she said, smiling through tears. "And somehow, you fixed everything else too." After the ceremony, I stood off to the side watching people laugh under the garden lights. My shop crew mixing with CEOs, neighbors chatting with venture capitalists. Worlds that were never meant to meet now sharing cake and conversation. Lily tugged my sleeve. "Daddy," she said, "they're starting the dance." Right, the father-daughter dance. She'd picked the song herself, Butterfly Fly Away. I'd practiced for weeks, usually tripping over my own boots while she giggled from the couch. The music started, and she climbed onto my shoes just like when she was little. We swayed awkwardly, slowly, her head resting on my chest. The smell of her shampoo, the sound of her tiny hum, it hit harder than any speech ever could. Halfway through the song, she whispered, "I love you, Daddy." I felt something sting behind my eyes. I love you too, baby. Always. People around us clapped quietly. For them, it was a sweet moment. For me, it was everything. The proof that all the sleepless nights, all the hard years, had led here. After the song ended, Lily ran off to find cake, and I made my way to the bar for a glass of water. That's when Derek showed up. He looked different. No swagger, no smirk, just a man who'd been learning how to stand without armor. His wife stood across the room, visibly pregnant, her hand on her belly. Beautiful wedding, he said. Thanks for coming, I told him. Didn't expect to see you. My wife convinced me, he said. Said I needed to see what redemption looks like in person. I laughed softly. She sounds smart. She is, he said, eyes wet. I'm going to be a dad soon. Any advice? I thought for a second. Love them when they're difficult. Be there when it's inconvenient. And remember, they're always watching, learning who to be from you. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. That's better than I deserve to hear from you. Maybe, I said, clinking my glass gently against his. But you're earning your way forward. That's what counts. Later that night, when most of the guests had drifted home and the lights dimmed to gold, I found Ava on the balcony overlooking the lake. She was barefoot, holding her heels in one hand, her dress rippling in the breeze. You okay? I asked. She turned, smiling. Better than okay. I just keep thinking about how one act of kindness in a snowstorm brought all of this. Guess we both hit the jackpot, I said. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. We built something good, didn't we? I looked out at the reflection of the lanterns on the water, at Lily chasing fireflies near the hedges, her laughter floating through the air. Yeah, I said. Something real. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking backward, just forward, and the view was beautiful. 5 years after the wedding, the gymnasium at Lily's high school was packed wall to wall. Parents fanned themselves with folded programs, teachers clustered near the stage, and a banner stretched above the bleachers read, Kindness Week. Stand up, speak out. I sat in the front row next to Ava, with our 3-year-old son, Thomas, sleeping across my lap. He had my stubborn jaw and his mother's patience, which meant he'd grow up unstoppable. When Lily walked onto the stage, the audience applauded politely, not realizing yet that she was about to level the whole room. She was 16 now, tall and confident, her dark hair braided back like her mother's. She adjusted the microphone, took a breath, and started. My dad taught me something important, she said. He told me the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who feel smallest inside. I felt Ava's hand slide into mine. Lily continued, her voice steady. When I was a baby, my mom died, and my dad was left raising me alone. People laughed at him. They called him a failure, said he'd never make it. But he didn't fight back with hate. He fought back by being kind, by working hard, by showing up. She paused, scanning the rows of students. One night, my dad helped a stranger stuck in a snowstorm. That stranger turned out to be my mom. Well, not the mom who gave birth to me, but the one who chose me. The one who's sitting right there. Ava wiped a tear. I couldn't move. That one act of kindness didn't just change his life, Lily said. It created mine. Because love has a way of echoing. What you give comes back. What you build with compassion outlasts everything built on cruelty. The auditorium was silent except for the creak of folding chairs. Even the restless kids in the back stopped whispering. Lily smiled slightly. So if someone's trying to make you feel less, remember this. Flowers bloom at different times. Some in spring, some in summer, some not until fall. But the ones that bloom late often bloom longest. She looked directly at a group of kids who'd been giving her friend a hard time all semester. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to others. You never know who's about to grow into something beautiful. Applause erupted like a wave. I felt Thomas stir in my arms, mumbling, Daddy, half asleep. Ava squeezed my hand, and I realized I was crying too. In the back of the auditorium, I spotted Derek. He looked older, softer around the edges. Beside him sat a boy with his same blue eyes, his son. Derek was clapping, proud, eyes shining. He caught my gaze, nodded once, and mouthed, Thank you. I nodded back. When the assembly ended, students rushed to the stage to hug Lily, and parents lined up to shake her hand. I stayed seated for a moment, just breathing it in. The sound, the light, the proof that kindness really does echo across years. Ava leaned against me. You realize she's you, right? I laughed quietly. No, I said. She's better. Later that night, at home, Lily joined us on the porch. Fireflies blinked over the yard. She sat between me and Ava, her head on my shoulder. "Dad," she said softly, "remember when I asked if we were poor?" I smiled. "Yeah, I figured it out," she said. "We're rich. Just not the kind people count." I kissed the top of her head. "That's the only kind that matters." She smiled, eyes half closed. "I like our kind." "Me too, sweetheart," Ava whispered. As the night deepened, the world felt still again. No ghosts left to face, no grudges left to carry. Just family, warmth, and the quiet truth that what began as mercy in a blizzard had turned into a life blooming in full color. Some stories end with revenge. The best ones end with redemption. And the very best, well, they don't end at all. They just keep growing.